On behalf of the 4 organizations that are collaborating for this event, welcome. Before we jump into the event proper, what I'd like to do is actually tell you a little bit about this event and how it began. Now, what you see here is actually the second conversation that we've had, actually the third, but why do we put second? The first one began as an experiment, just a little bit of an experiment. Then when we progressed a little bit more, and here we've got some new friends joining us, like Miak, Siew, our very kind host. Thank you very much for welcoming us into your beautiful space. So I'd like to introduce Tatt right next to me to tell you a little bit more about how the series of conversations, religion and atheism, began.
All right, I don't know what you count as number 2 to make this number 3, but the first one was a year ago. A year ago at the CDC Central, so that's HDB Hub. Me and lmran, who's the middle person who sat there, who's sitting there, decided to have one round of religion and atheism. And it's not religion versus atheism, by the way. So to have a conversation going that you usually would not have when it is organized perhaps by a top-down government level sort of entity. We wanted this to be something that is really ground up and to have sparks fly a little bit, to kick the ball around, to see where some of these things go. And at the same time, try to see what limits we can push towards a greater understanding that comes about by us being a little bit uncomfortable and still being able to come back and face the real world. So having started that, and what's number 2? Paul Hedges, that was the book launch. Yeah, book launch. Professor Paul Hedges of NTU had a book launch called Hate Spin. No, not Hate Spin, but how to have towards a better disagreement. And again, that's towards how we take offense and so on. So if you call that number 2, this will be number 3. And I think that's as far as I want to say about that. And it's great that we now have Pastor Miak's place here to be able to do this. And with the panel over here, we hope to take it to session number 4 and involve more people. And really have this ground up thing be a thing of the future moving forward. Okay?
Thank you, Tatt. Please be seated. All right, so today's conversation is basically going to be quite informal. What we're going to do is to deal with the 3 questions that you see up there on the screen. So the speakers will have a little something to say about the first topic, and then we will open the floor for questions. We will have ushers who will be moving around with the microphone. So if you have a question, please raise your hands. We will come to you. Before we start, however, I would like to give you a little bit of an introduction about the 4 people you see up there. I'm going to begin with our moderator, Ching, right at the end there. Hello. Now, Ching is the founding member and executive director of the Buddhist Youth Network. She has led numerous initiatives promoting interfaith understanding. In 2006, Singaporeans folded 1.8 million paper lotuses for interfaith harmony. 50 places of worship, hospitals, charities, and schools participated in this Project Million Lotus. In 2007, the Singapore Interfaith Youth Forum, the very first of its kind, bonded youth leaders over various faiths. Taoist Master Wei Yi, IRO youth member Saifu Anwar, and Buddhist social worker Billy Low still work together. Now, in 2013, a guidebook, Agree to Disagree, Conversations about Conversions, was developed to support Buddhists facing proselytizing. This July, Community Services Promoting Interfaith Understanding is the highlight of Singapore Buddhist Youth Day, organized by Ching Association, the Buddhist Youth Network. Our next speaker, Muhammad Imran, deals with issues of interfaith, diversity, and multiculturalism here in Singapore. He is the founding member of Leftwrite Center, which is a dialogue initiative for young professionals. He's also a key member of the Reading Group, which is a discussion platform advocating for reform in the Malay Muslim community. Now, he's also active with WALI, and WALI is Women and Law in Islam that deals with gender equality issues for Muslim women. His writings have appeared in the Straits Times, Today, Channel News Asia, Berita Harian, the Malaysian Insider, the Jakarta Post, and the South China Morning Post. Our second speaker and also our very kind host is the Reverend Miak Siew. Miak Siew has been serving as the full-time pastor for this free community church since he was ordained by the Metropolitan Community Churches in 2011 after completing his Master in Divinity at Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley, California. Now, he believes that while religion has often been the source of conflict and oppression, it can also be a source of strength and hope and agent for change. He has been actively involved in interfaith work since his seminary days, and he hopes that he can help add to the voices that dispel the distrust and hate that is so prevalent when people talk about other religions. And our last speaker, Tatt was schooled in science, graduating in 1986 as an electrical engineer from Canada. He said he lost his soul in the corporate world for 26 years before finding a newfound religion in life by dabbling in arts and volunteering in humanism. He's lived in China for 2 years, he cast and directed 2 movies, edited 2 NAC-sponsored books, and he says his most satisfying moments is generally living the moments. Scientist, artist, and humanist, Tatt. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Shamima. I'm the Vice President of the Singapore Humanist Society, and I now give the floor over to Ching, our moderator for the evening.
Thank you, Shamima. So I'm just going to remind us about the house rules that we have and point out a few very important points, and then we can continue with our conversation. So we've got a copy of the house rule pasted at the back, and there's one here. But let me just read it out so that we can all take note of it, yeah? So there are 6 house rules. The first is the golden rule, and that is to treat others as you would wish to be treated. The second rule is agree to disagree. And in our case, when we disagree, we do so in a civil and respectful manner. And we continue to remain on amicable terms without having to accept opposing views. The third point is to use the I language, meaning when you express your personal views, avoid speaking on behalf of a wider group. I believe we're all here as individuals. We don't have the responsibility or the burden of representing any of our identities. The fourth point is to listen while others are speaking, and for one person to speak at a time. After all, the purpose of our conversation is really for us to learn as much as we can from each other. Yeah. The fifth point, all participants' views and ideas are relevant to the discussion, and of course, within the time limit, deserve to be heard. And finally, the sixth point, let us all be open-minded and avoid being judgmental. So today, we are having a conversation. We're not having a debate. And so a conversation invites self-awareness and reflection. And it also creates the possibility of being wrong and openness to change. So the purpose of a conversation like tonight is to generate greater understanding and not to win an argument. So in addition to the rules, what we thought is important to assure you that we are trying our best to create a safe space is that although this session is being recorded, please be assured that the camera is just facing us and not any member of the audience. And when you're asking questions, volunteers will be giving you the mic, so you will not appear on camera at all. But at any time when you're asking a question, if you do not wish for the recording to continue, please feel very free to tell us to stop the recording, right? So let me go into the format. Tonight we will be discussing the 3 points up there, and how we will do it is for each of my 3 friends here to speak about the issue, the topic, for 5 minutes. And then after that, we will have 10 minutes of question and answer. And after which, we will go to the second point. And this is how we will, this is the format. So for those of us who've got questions, please make use of the 10 minutes. It's quite a short time. And the more questions you have, the more discussions we have, the more we will all learn. And for those of you who have comments and not really questions, I urge you to keep it short so that we can focus more on the questions and to tap our 3 speakers here as much as possible. Yeah. And finally, tonight, when I was invited to moderate, one of the reasons that I felt very compelled to do so is that this is a ground-up initiative. It is a space that we create for ordinary people like us to have very frank dialogue and discussions and learning about issues that are very important and personal to us. So this is really quite different from state-organized events. And also this space is very much for us as individuals, right? To learn and to grow. And so while we appreciate that inevitably in Singapore, it's very hard not to mention the government or the state, I would just like to remind everyone that this is not a political discussion. The focus is very much on our personal narratives, our personal understanding and exchanges. Right. So with that, I will invite Miak to start with the first point, and that is to share on your personal experiences of religious offense.
I'll start off with asking a question. I'm sure that you have one friend who is an Apple user who is a fanatic. And anyone who says anything negative about Apple, he or she is going to lash out at you and ask you to just shut up. And if you even dare to suggest that Apple is going downhill after the passing of Steve Jobs, you trigger a war. Mention the missing headphone jack, good luck to you. And that is just about Apple, a brand, a thing, a material thing. And it can trigger reactions that's so passionate and and arguments so heated that people stop being friends with each other. You may even think that it might be religious to some degree. You know, the word fanatic is often related to religion. I think that we need to be conscious of all these things that surround us, that make us, that we find value in, or we ascribe to, or that we hold very dear to ourselves. And when they're under threat or under attack, people's feelings get agitated. Some time ago, on one of my Facebook posts, Amos Yee, yes, him, posted a video as a comment on my post. It had nothing to do with my post at all. It was him hijacking my post to publicize his video, which was talking about the inconsistencies in the Bible. Something that I already know. This is what I learned in seminary. You know, you're telling someone who went to seminary for 3 years, have a master's degree in divinity, something that I already know, and like, why? But he was hijacking my post, you know, for his own reasons. I wrote back to him and I go, you know, do not hijack my post for your own agenda. If you want to say this, you're free to say it. What you're saying is actually true, right? There are inconsistencies in Scripture. But that doesn't mean that you have the right to hijack someone else's post. And really, my faith is not going to get shaken because a 16-year-old posted something that disturbed me or said something that is actually true about my religion. My God isn't so small that a post from a 16-year-old can destroy or offend in some way. Of course, we know what happened to Amos Yee since then. And when he was incarcerated, some of my friends asked me to speak at Hong Lim Park for a free Amos Yee event. I don't know how many of you were there. I agreed to it because I don't think that a 16-year-old deserves to be treated in such a manner by society just because he said something negative about religion, right? And the way to deal with an attention-seeking 16-year-old is to ignore. By responding, then we are feeding the troll. And we're giving him what he wants. And of course, I had to consider many things. I was in my collar, my clergy collar at Holland Park. I could not talk about religion because that's a no-no, right? But I could say some certain things. Someone in the audience, the people who were there in support of him, shouted, "Do you forgive Amos?" And I was like, what? Before I even get to start on my speech that I prepared, I was like, what? And I just went, what's there to forgive? I wasn't offended, and I think my God doesn't need me to be the knight in shining armor to defend this deity of mine, right? You can call, you can say anything you want. And I think that this is coming from my perspective, because I think I'm grounded in knowledge. For someone of my faith, a fellow Christian, who may not be as familiar with the Bible or familiar with the religion, they may not react in the same way. They might react differently or defensively. I wonder who are the people who called police, when Amos posted all those things. Really got nothing better to do, right? I think they got angry. And anger, in the work that I do counseling people, anger is always a secondary emotion. It is never a primary emotion. There's always something underlying anger. Is it hurt, doubt, fear, discomfort, disrespected, frustration? I don't know. There are many possible emotions underlying anger. And often, I'll say that religious people mask our fear and doubt with anger because we don't know how to grapple with it. We cannot run to our pastors and, pastor, this person said this thing about Christianity. They go like, yeah, it's true. Right? Especially when we are trying to prove to other people that we are right or we are more right. Then there is no place for doubt. Doubt seems to be a position of weakness. If we are not certain of our beliefs and our faith, then how do we defend it? We react. Doubt equals to weakness. And if you dig even deeper, often we are trying to not prove to other people, but actually to ourselves that we are right. And I think that knowledge, that how people react oftentimes to being offended, may teach us to be more thoughtful in how we phrase certain things, on how we engage. And so, for me, often, in my religious leadership, or how I teach my community, is the opposite of faith is not doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty. Because if you are certain about something, you don't need to have faith. You're certain about it. You're certain about the floor that you're walking on. You don't need a faith to walk across it, right? But when you're walking across thin ice, then it's quite a different thing. And that doubt is actually helpful for us, especially religious or non-religious people, because it is something that keeps us on our toes that we may be wrong. And we are often wrong. And that helps us be self-correcting in some way. And I'll wrap up here. I think there are different types of religious offense. One is insult, or meant to trigger you or push your buttons, like what Amos was trying to do. The other, and often we take it as offensive, is actually criticism that may actually be helpful to us about some practices or some beliefs that may not be helpful to us. I think criticism is important to keep us grounded and not in that self-righteous kind of living. Yeah. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Miak. So I'm giving maybe 1 or 2 minutes more for this first segment because it's about personal experiences and it's very important to lay the ground for our discussion. Yeah. So Tatt, would you?
Sure. Thanks, Ching. Let me start by saying that since I've had a good childhood, so if you're going to hear my childhood story, it's going to take more than 5 minutes to go through. I had a very good childhood, and that I was a very self-centered kid. I was the firstborn. I was the only son in the family. I have 3 younger sisters. So just imagine how they were bullied by me over the years. Being self-centered, I kind of felt that now in my age, right now, I feel that perhaps God did not give me the opportunity to feel sorrow, to feel all these bad situations before I have to take him up in a very, very serious way. But being a self-centered kid, it meant that I could really sort of see things being revolving around me. And by the way, my wife is here. I won't point her out, but she's keeping me honest here tonight, and to keep me less self-centered, hopefully. Being that meant a lot of issues growing up. And the issues that had to do with I had to be sort of like my father. I had to sort of act a certain way going forward. But we never really had a religion, because I've always thought that when I was younger that I was a Buddhist. Turns out it wasn't so, because every time when I look at the altar, we had chicken, we had pork, we had fish. So we kill all these things anyway. So we could not have been a Buddhist anyway. And it was only perhaps when I was 11th or so that when my grandpa passed away, and there was a ceremony, the wake and the funeral, everything, when it was ostensibly Taoist, or had that Taoist spin, and that my dad had to catch a real live rooster across the pit of the coffin, yeah. That it dawned onto me that I wasn't a Buddhist, that I perhaps was raised up in a Taoist family. And so that was a very big surprise to me. Not that that I found God or anything like that, but that I just didn't know all these years that I actually had a very, very different religion that I didn't know of. And that was quite an awakening experience. And the year after, my whole universe kind of collapsed. Collapsed in a way in that this was at a playground. And of course, there are traumas in playgrounds. And this particular one, somebody was hogging the slides. And I had to go to him and say that your mother looked like my XXX. It turns out to be my favorite pet. So that was when I was dishing out the offense. And a boy, the rude awakening was he pinned me down on the floor. So he was a smaller kid. He pinned me down on the ground in the playground, and I was all defensive. So that was sort of the first lesson that I had, that I wasn't the center of the universe anymore. And later in life, I don't think I was really much offended by anything that had to do with my faith because of my non-faith. Yeah. But I have been dishing things out, I must say. So I want to be talking about the other side. I've been dishing things out. And occasionally when I fight with my wife, I would say that, darn, how can a Buddhist act like this? And this is something that was hurtful to her. So I was trying to hurt her as a person by saying that Buddhism is a good thing, so how can you be like that? Or I had a neighbor from hell some years back, and I remember that he took certain things away from the common compound, and that the only thing I could say to him was that, you know, between you and me, you're saying that you didn't take this thing, but what if I say this? The person who took that thing will go to hell. Boy, that really got his blood boiling. Okay, so I was using perfect religion to get back at an imperfect person. So I think I want to offer that point of view as my way of saying offense and taking offense. And I think with that, I'd rather be giving the moderator more time and then to give them more time. So that would be my pitch in terms of the offence side.
Thank you, Taxi. Both speakers, one central theme that I picked out was they both were highly reflective of your personal experiences. So, Iman.
Thank you for sharing those stories. Maybe just a show of hand, how many of you have been offended before on the basis of your religion? Can I just, yeah, or non-religion also, yeah. How many of you have been on the offensive? You have said something that is deemed offensive, right? Okay, it's going to be exciting.
Are we doing a confession here?
No. We're not doing a confession, but probably I'll be the one doing the confession. So there are two aspects of offense. One is being offended, and the other one is to give offense. Yeah. So I'll start by offending others. No. A reflection of me in the past offending others. I'm not going to offend you now. In the sense that I think a lot of the giving offense that I did in the past was largely racist in nature. Not so much of religion at the initial stages. I think growing up being Malay here in Singapore and a minority, we face this brunt of racism on us. So at the same time also, we channel out that same stereotypical views on others, and therefore I also become racist. So, if the Chinese were to look down on the Malay, and I am seen as part of the Malay community, then I will find someone else to channel that frustration and say the very same thing to another category of people that seem to be lower than me. So for the Malay community, it's normal for them to look down on the Indian community. Yeah, so actually it's a sad situation for the Indian community to face the brunt of racism, both from the Malays and the Chinese, yeah, for a lot of stereotypical views. So I grew up in that kind of environment, and I remember giving some offensive remarks, you're smelly, that kind of thing. But there are three kinds of giving offense. One is really vilification, yeah, which slowly then later on shifted to kind of snide remarks. Yeah, so after a while you realize, when you establish friendship and all that, you don't really hate or look down so much on them, but sometimes it comes out subconsciously, like giving snide remarks. Sometimes it can be in a joke form, yeah, but you know that in that joke form you're actually saying the same things about those stereotypes of the other person that you dislike, yeah. Which eventually then later on come to a third stage where you realize that these are wrong, and this is where the conscious rejection of racism occurs. Now what I'm saying is that when it comes to giving offense, it's kind of a complicated process. So it's sometimes important to be aware of the context of the developmental process of someone in trying to deal with this, especially when the issue is systemic in nature. Yeah. My episodes of offending others in terms of religion happen largely in my teenage life, late teenage life, in my almost 20s, when I became a religious fundamentalist. I know I've shared this several times to several people, but I don't have time to go into the details of it. But mostly I would say it's non-malice in nature when I offended a person of another faith, because it was driven by my own sense of superiority and the need to win a debate, because there's certain religious arrogance there in my previous life, yeah, as a religious fundamentalist, because I was out to convert others. So Islam is the superior religion, and all other religions are false, and I'm on this mission to prove my religion is right, your religion is wrong, and why don't you come over to my religion? Yeah. So along the way, there are many remarks that I said that can be construed to be offensive. Yeah. And I was lucky I wasn't living in the age of social media. Otherwise, that's it. Yeah. But I did get into trouble. I did get into trouble when I got a call from the Internal Security Department once, and I'll share this with you, because of an email circulation that I did. At that time, there's no social media, but there was email. Yeah. So apparently, I was this self-righteous person who's concerned about this Malay person who converted to Christianity. And he was a teacher. And I was a teacher back then, yeah. So I was sending out this mass email to everyone, be careful of this person, you know, he's going to corrupt our kids. Yeah, I feel ashamed telling these stories now, yeah. Anyway, I got a call from the ISD and said, can we meet you? And I was scared. You know, I was in my early years, yeah, of course. Oh, shit, well, I've got myself into trouble, yeah. Okay, where do we meet? At this McDonald's in Baleste. Okay, I do not know you. It's okay, I know you. Yeah. So I met him, yeah, so we chatted, and of course he raised this issue, and yeah, so those are some interesting moments, but of course those was my previous life, yeah. I've changed a lot over the years. The process of changing is a long story that I don't think it's time to share now. So those are episodes of me offending others. Now, being offended, I don't really remember much of being offended by a person of another religion. I feel I'm being offended by a person of the same religion as me, because I've been accused of being a heretic before. I've been accused of being out of Islam, simply for my views that were construed to be non-mainstream, yeah? So I was offended by that. I was sad, but eventually I move on. Yeah? You can call me whatever you like. I don't care anymore, yeah? But I don't really feel offended by a person of another religion, because probably my nature, especially in my earlier years, of being argumentative, I would be driven to counter those assertions rather than to retreat, cower, and cry in the corner. Yeah? But because of my argumentative nature, I reflected upon it, it also allows me to eventually learn how to listen. Because I want to assert my point, eventually I have to also shut up and listen to others. So slowly that process of listening really helps in my change, in the process of change, and also the openness to revise and change some of my erroneous views. But I must say that this is just me. Not everyone will respond in the same way. But probably I will not be a different person if there was no process of engagement where me trying to assert my point, listening to the other point to counter my point, and eventually opening up myself to the possibility of me being wrong. And that's, I think, the same point that was raised by Reverend Miak just now. And whatever erroneous or offensive views that I have, if they were curtailed and silenced early on, then I don't think I will grow. Imagine if I were to make something, that, make a remark that is offensive, and the first response is actually to just shut me down and put me aside. I will never learn from the process. But because I said something that is deemed to be offensive, the other person has the chance to engage me on that, and we engage each other, that eventually I begin to learn from that process, and I mature, and I begin to weigh between bad opinions and good opinions. Yeah. So that process of engagement to me is really, really important, rather than to just shut down the person, even though that person may be saying something that is offensive to me. Yeah. Because probably there's something true about that, what that person says that I can learn from. Yeah. So that has been my attitude, and I think it has helped me a lot in my journey and my process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imran. I have to acknowledge that our three speakers took the tonight by being vulnerable. Like, they just kicked off and they were just sharing in terms of inviting us to share their reflection, especially Imran. Thank you for, so the thing about being vulnerable is so important, right? Because if we are to be aware of ourselves, and as Miak said, right, a large part of taking offense is this stirring of fear or discomfort. And I thought you guys set a very good role model of being vulnerable, which makes it easier for us tonight to ask them more questions or to bring up topics that you feel are kind of like always on your mind, that you kind of feel like you don't have a chance to bring it up, to ask for opinions, or you kind of like feel that you are even being like censored, you know, like in everyday life you can't talk about such things, right? I want to really assure you that tonight, you know, this safe and precious space is really the time for us to talk about real stuff, right? Things that bother you, and things that these three speakers up here can share their views on. for us to process and move on and be really the kind of diverse society that we are. Yeah. So now let's have questions from the floor. Mr. Sito. Oh, sorry, cannot say name.
Was that on purpose?
No first names.
Thank you.
So while we are fixing the mic, what?
Okay, now it's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So-
Tassi, for your opinion about Buddhist and then Taoist and then don't know what religion that is. Yeah. But basically, we have heard the Islamic point of view, the Christian point of view, and your maybe half Taoist point of view. But we have not heard the Buddhist point of view. Maybe can we hear the Buddhist point of view of this topic?
Thank you. Let's take 3 questions, and then we can all. Yeah, I will. I'm the moderator. I take offense. Kidding. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, panel. Just a very short question. Is there such a thing as a right to giving offense?
Right to giving offense. Do we have a third question? Yes.
Thank you for your sharing so far. I was very struck by Imran's comment about what it's like to be a heretic or to be accused of hypocrisy. So I was wondering if the other speakers could share about whether they've ever been accused of being hypocritical or not being a pious enough believer of your own faiths. Like say because of your own personal views, like towards be it LGBT issues or be it economic issues, social economic issues. Have you ever been accused of hypocrisy? How do you feel towards them?
All right, so I'll just do a very quick comment. I don't speak for all the Buddhists here, and my understanding of Buddhism is really beginner. But for me personally, actually, I want to admit that when I'm at home, my husband is also a Buddhist. So sometimes we will go into this thing about so inconsiderate people of other religions are. Of course, at home we talk about very specific, stuff, right? But I catch myself doing this quite a lot, and talking about being hypocritical, right? Like people don't know I do that, but I think I do reflect on why we will lapse into that once in a while. So that's I don't have an answer to that. I'm still reflecting. I think as with all religion, I'm sure Buddhists take offense at some stuff. But what I want to just point out very quickly, right, is that, again, I think like with all religion or maybe just human nature, we tend to be chauvinist as well. So if you belong to a certain religion or a certain gender or a certain, of course women are stronger than men, right? Women give birth, and so I just want to put it out there that myself included, and I observe my Buddhist friends, I do notice a certain kind of chauvinism of my religion is better than the rest. And once you have this kind of thinking, it actually does display out in your behavior or in your attitude when you are interacting with people. So, yeah.
Do you want to talk about the religious offense? Okay. The right to religion.
Thank you. The right to give offense, right? It's kind of complicated, and I think along the way later in the discussion, more of it will be fleshed out. But I think people have the right to say anything they like. At least, you as long as you have a mouth, you have a finger to type on Facebook, you can say anything. But there will be consequences depending on the context of the society or the situation is. So if you see right in the sense that, of course, you can say whatever you like, but you also have to realize that whatever you say do have consequences. So it's a matter of balancing whether you are prepared to face certain consequences or whether those consequences you feel is fair or not. So these are a whole set of different issues, yeah? Now, but at the same time, it also depends what you understand by offense. I think Miak has said that on one hand, it could mean insult. Yeah. Of course, if you want to really insult someone, you can do that. You can just say it out, right? No one can stop you. But you will have to face the consequences based on the law of the land or whatever is the norm of the society. On the second aspect, there's also the offense in terms of criticism, right? And many criticisms can actually be valid. And the point is not to confuse between an insult and a real valid, proper criticism. Now, when it comes to criticism that is responsible and done in a civil way, I'm all for it. There should not be any attempt to curtail that, to stop that, to censor that. Because if we do not have criticisms in society, we will never learn and truth will never emerge. That's at least is my position. And that will include certain types of criticism that may not be in conventional academic intellectual way, and that includes satires. But satires has to be properly understood in terms of directing it at really power holders and not a kind of satire that actually attacks the vulnerable and the weak and the marginalized society. Then that is not the function of satires. So these are the very complex issues that later on maybe we can dissect it again. Yeah? Thank you.
I'll chime in, not on that, but on the being offended. I mean, I'm gay and I'm Christian, so a lot of people go like, aren't you a walking paradox or oxymoron in some way? And there are people, I think I get more offense from fellow Christians than from people of other religions. I have emails or messages on Facebook out of the blue who says that you are leading your flock to hell. And in the beginning, in maybe the earlier days, earlier in my work, I'll be affected. Nowadays, I just go block. I mean, that's it, I mean, what is this person trying to do? This person is trying to press my buttons. And I will not let you press my buttons because I need my energy focused on something that's more constructive. I don't need to spend my energy on something that's negative that will arrive at nothing, Unless because this person's really, suffering from internalized homophobia, and he's actually gay himself, but then, lashing out on me because he's projecting all these stuff on me, that's a different thing. But I think that if someone wants to press my buttons, I'm sorry, I do not have that kind of capacity to handle all that block. If you need help, you ask for help. You don't say someone you lead your flock to hell when you actually cry for help. And I think that's the thing. And my involvement in interfaith work has also put my religion or my religiosity in question. Why am I not trying to convert people to Christianity? And why am I doing this work? Because in my experience, and this is the reality, we're not going to bash each other on the head and everyone convert to one religion. Humanity has been diverse from the very, very beginning, and it's expressed in different ways. And even people, I don't like the word atheist. No, atheist I think sounds okay. The religious and the faith and the people with no faith. It's like, sounds so bad, right? But people who are a-religious, I think that's the engagement that we want. We want to be able to live together. My hope is that we can live together in understanding each other, and to build something that we can all exist in this common space, in this small planet that we are on, and not kill each other, and focus on the things that we need to care about and we need to put energy into. Yeah.
For me, it's interesting that you mentioned leading your flock to hell. Yesterday, I was with a friend at the MRT station, and I said, hey, do you know that this religion and the atheist conversation is going on tomorrow? And he said that, I couldn't attend, but you know what? Give them hell. And then he paused there for 2 seconds, and he winked. Of course, he was saying that, of course, we don't believe in hell, but give them hell anyway. Yeah. So that's sort of a way of dishing it out. And it's sort of playing both sides a little bit. Our satire is of that fashion. And about hypocrisy. what can I say, that we have our internal issues too. There are people who would come up to me and say, you know what, Tatsi, you should again go out there and use signs and go back to what you did last year. And just hit them on the particular verses and how that cannot be true and so on and so forth. But then we've already done that. Yeah, we've already debated that, and that we need to move on. In that there's always two sides of the house, which is one, we will always try to deconvert or whatever, bring reason to the atheists or to the population. But on the other hand, for those that we cannot take out, it means that we have to live with them too. So these two particular areas we got to reconcile, and it's very difficult for say the 18.5% of Singaporeans who do not profess to have a religion or go to any particular service to really be one or the other. It's a very, very thin spread. And to represent them, I can only say I when I'm up here. And the satire thing, and sometimes this is a little bit of where I'm a little bit insensitive now, which is it's very difficult for us to take offense because it's very difficult to offend our God because we have none, but to offend the person, which is very, very difficult to do sometimes. Because if we can already erase so many things away, we can also sort of take that part out if they offend the personal self. So we tend to go out there a lot to be offending people, but there's always that very clear line of offending and incitement of violence. And I think we'll talk more about that when we get further. For instance, I might go up to Imran and I will say, hey, you know, God created Chinese so that we will take care of the haram food. Yeah. So stuff like that I would say to him, and I think I can get away with it. All right? Yeah. So that's sometimes what I do. Yeah. I hope that answers your question sort of in a way.
Hypocrisy. Just quick response.
I'm just trying to think of what hypocrisy that I'm accused of. I think that it's more likely that I'm accused of being a heretic than a hypocrite. And that because I think that being gay is okay, you know, in terms, I think that what I see, you know, as Christianity. I read a book by Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, and he said, if there are 1,000 Buddhists in the room, there are 1,000 Buddhisms. I would say, I'll make the same claim, if 1,000 Christians in the room, there are probably 1,001 Christianities, because some people cannot make up their mind. And we'll never truly agree, even within our own religion, and we are insecure. Often we are insecure about our religion, and we're trying to make sense of that. And we'll try, and the reason, and what happens is that we'll try to exert that our truth is the truth, because that's the only way that we can convince ourselves and mitigate that cognitive dissonance. It's all psychology. I mean, that's why, you know, people can be convinced to sell their 5-room flat and into a 4-room flat and give to the church. You know, it's all psychology. You know, and I don't subscribe to that. I think that's a very dangerous thing. But I think that's a journey that we have to take, and that's the part of understanding someone where they are coming from when they are insecure, and they are very affected when you attack them head on, and maybe gently leading them, you know, like asking questions and helping them find support. A lot of times, I would say that there are a lot of pastors in Singapore, Christian pastors, who are not very well versed beyond the scripture that they read. They don't read much about psychology. They don't read much about history. And then you ask them, well, don't you know that Christians kill a lot of people too? You know, do you know the issues with the missionaries going into Africa and that's having devastating effect today with regards to HIV? Because they tell, you know, you can only have one wife, and they tell all the men divorce the wives, the other wives, so they are left with one wife, but the women are left destitute and have to become sex workers. And then that's where the spread of HIV started, and the church, you know, a few denominations have owned up to that issue. The Lutheran Church has said, you know, we screwed up. But that's a reality, and we need to be reflective. You know, I mean, the Christian missionaries who went to clothe the natives who are, you know, barbarians because they are all naked, because of all the germs that's in, because people who used to wear clothes wash their clothes. The natives don't, and they get infected and they die. Because they don't have the same practices we do, and who are culpable? We Christians. You know, in some way. Yeah, I think that we need to be thoughtful about the many different areas, science, history, and all that. And I think some of these people struggle because they don't have direct access to their pastor to answer questions. I mean, think of a mega church, 30,000 people, you cannot give them the time of the day. You give the time of day to every single one in your flock. I wonder how much time would that take?
Can I just add one small point? You know, when someone tells you that, oh, you are offending God, and I'm here to defend God, I think that person is lying, yeah? I mean, God is God. He cannot be offended by his mere mortals who saying some stuff, yeah? I mean, a God that is offended by, you know, petty issues like this is certainly not a God worth worshipping. It is the person who feels offended. It is the human being that feels offended. So, whenever someone says you're offending God, you're offending the religion, I think my own personal take will be to ask myself why I am offended. So I would tell the person, maybe first you need to ask yourself why you feel offended. Don't say God is offended. You are offended. Ask yourself why you feel offended. And secondly, also to ask, why is that person offending me? So perhaps there is something that you can learn about yourself and the way you respond to certain triggers. And also you can try to find out more about the other person who is saying stuff that is offensive to you, why he or she is making that remark. Maybe there's some context, there's some history of it. It invites you to actually reach out to that person, to call that person for a cup of tea, sit down, let's find out more about each other. And perhaps, you know, that's a way of establishing that relationship first and trying to understand where each person is coming from. I think that would be more meaningful than rather going on the first step of, oh, you're offending my religion and now I'm going to take it against you. So that will be my suggestion.
Wow, if we all do what you suggest, then Singapore will be a very, very peaceful and empathetic place. Maybe the different religions can think about setting up workshops to teach your people how to do that. The reason why I say this is because I think a lot of times we don't have the chance to even sometimes formulate our opinion and to also speak up. And the public discourse space is like, it's so precious and it's so few, you know. So that's certainly the direction to go to. But I think, as our speakers have pointed out, if you are speaking from your position of your religion, it's really important for you to know, to continue to learn about the religion and all the historical, sociological, psychological aspects of it. That will really equip you to not just feel more at ease when you feel offended, but also to go into the kind of engagement that Imran has talked about. So nicely, we flow into the second topic, which is what your faith says about giving and taking offense. So as our speakers are speaking, I would like to invite everyone here to also start thinking about if you've got any questions. As you can see from the first round, 10 minutes just came and gone so quickly like that, right? So we really value the questions that you have, yeah? So I think we are very cordial, we are very harmonious, so we figure out an order, right? So for the second question, Imran is going to speak first.
Now, what does my faith say about giving and taking offense? I must first make a disclaimer that I am speaking as an individual, and I'm not representative of this Islam. Yeah? No one can claim to speak in the name of the religion. Yeah? So, in many interfaith dialogues I go to, I always say you can only speak as an individual coming from your faith tradition based on your own experience or learning, and do not speak in the name of a bigger group because, like what you said, yeah, there are going to be 1.5 billion Muslims in the world? Yeah. Right. In terms of giving offense, and this is my understanding from a Muslim perspective and growing up in a Muslim tradition, that the Quran did not shy away from engagement. Its main concern is actually truth itself. Yeah. So there's a verse in the Quran: "Produce your proof if you are speaking the truth." Yeah. Maybe the humanists like this very much because you always want to engage on rational grounds. Yeah. Or afala tafakkaru, like do you not think? Yeah. So it's an invitation to be more reflective. Having said that, the Quran is also a very polemical piece of literature. Yeah. So if you have read the Quran, you will know that there are many verses in the Quran that were actually engaging with the Christians and the Jews in particular because of the context of Arabia at that times. And can this be construed as giving offense? Now I'm thinking of the issue of Imam Nala recently, you know that incident of the Imam who were mentioning something against the Jews and the Christians. Now, of course, the issue is that those words were not actually from the Quran. But if you were to look into the Quran, there will be verses that are akin to that, yeah? Because of the context of course, there's a context to those verses that were polemical towards the Jews and the Christians. So can that be construed as giving offense? And if you were to be quoting from that Quran for a Muslim, you regard it as a word of God, then how then do we deal with this whole issue of giving offense? Yeah. Now, at the same time, I must also stress that the Quran is quite clear in terms of promoting healthy engagement. In one verse, for example, argue with them in ways that are best. Yeah, build hikmah with wisdom. And also, insults are not acceptable. And this is where the distinction between criticisms and insult comes into play in the Quran itself. Because there is a verse that says, O you who believe, do not let not one people deride another. It may be that they are better than them. Nor let women deride other women. It may be that they are better than them. And do not defame yourselves or insult one another with nicknames, etc., etc. Yeah. So this is one verse, and the other verse says that do not revile those whom they call upon apart from God, unless if not, they will revile your God out of enmity and without knowledge. So it's also an invitation not to insult the God of another person. So this has been the model that the Quran actually lays out in terms of the ethics of engagement, but it does not shy away from engagement. Yeah. Now, because our concern is actually with truth, I would say that Muslims need not be so thin-skinned. Yeah, we need to develop a bit more thick skin. Yeah? Because sometimes when the truth hits you in the face and you realize how dumb you are, you can actually feel hurt. Yeah? I mean, I've been through that process. I was so confident and arrogant, and then until that person actually says something that makes sense and actually I'm wrong, it hurts, yeah, to suddenly realize you're stupid. Yeah? And sometimes we feel hurt not because something that is said is false, but because we recognize it's true and we refuse to come to terms with it. So I think that's one point that we need to remember. So I've come to this conclusion, yeah, that there is a correlation between people who are easily hurt and angry at the slightest provocation with a lack of self-reflection and a certain degree of intellectual retardation. Now I'm using it as a concept, in the sense that they are not well equipped with their own tradition, with their own ethical tradition, their own knowledge of their religion, etc. In other words, I personally will not take such people seriously. Even if you can gather 1 million Muslims on the streets of Jakarta against this he lost the election, the one who was in running Ahok, right? Even you can gather 1 million and they are saying that he supposedly insulted Islam, I won't take them seriously in a sense because they are not driven by any real substance. Yeah? But any government, I will agree, will have to take them seriously. Because any government will have to take angry, dumb people with a sense of moral outrage and arrogance seriously because they can cause real damage to society, especially when it's a multicultural, fragile kind of plural environment. So one final point is, again, from the faith perspective, yeah, there was this story where the Prophet Muhammad, he used to walk at the marketplace and there's this blind Jew who will curse Muhammad. Yeah? He has not seen Muhammad in his life. And Muhammad will feed him food every day without fail on his way to the market. And while feeding this person, he was said to be a blind Jew. Yeah, would curse Muhammad because of what he heard about the teachings of Muhammad that he disagreed with. But Muhammad didn't reveal himself. Yeah. eventually until the Prophet passed away. And then the companion of the Prophet, who is the name of Umar al-Khattab, continued and feed the blind Jew. And suddenly he felt that the hands is a bit rough. This is not the usual hand. The way it's being fed with gentleness, etc. And he realized that you are not the same person who has been feeding me. Who are you? And Umar said, my name is Umar. And where is that person before you? Oh, he has passed away. And who is he? And he's Muhammad. And that blind Jew realized that all the while he's been cursing Muhammad while he was feeding him. And the Prophet didn't even respond. Yeah? So there are many such stories that I can go on and on from the Muslim tradition, which actually Muslims need to rediscover. I don't understand why we get angry at the slightest provocation and we go with a sense of outrage. Of course, there are explanations for it in the sense of the kind of low self-esteem that many Muslim communities are facing in the face of the geopolitical play and coming out of colonialism, etc. There are many aspects that can be explained. But this is where the task of education, of making the Muslims understand what they're going through so that they can better reflect on the conditions they are going through, and therefore their responses will be more reflective and also to draw from their own tradition that they have neglected.
Thank you, Imran.
I have two stories from the Bible, or two parts. One is from the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. The prophet Elisha was insulted by a bunch of young boys, I think, and called bold. They called him out for being bold. And he got angry, and he cursed them, and 2 bears came out and mauled 42 of them. So that may be one way that you want to look at responding to religious offense or insult, right? Don't insult the person that represents God in some way. I'm not that keen on that kind of reading. I mean, just call you bold. What's wrong? They are just naming a truth. You are bold, right? But I rather go to what Jesus taught. Because on the Sermon on the Mount, he said, you have heard that it was said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. And he also taught, you have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. I think that if we summarize, or at least for myself, when I summarize the core of my faith, it is about love. It's about loving God and loving my neighbor. And my neighbor is not defined by just my Christian neighbors, it's my neighbors. It's whoever is in that area that I'm with, who I'm in relation with. Whether it is an atheist, a Muslim, a Buddhist, whoever, that is my neighbor. And what is a loving response? A loving response is not reacting anger with anger, but anger with compassion. Why is this person angry? Did this person have a bad argument with his wife or with someone, and that triggered, and I'm just a convenient target for the anger? Or has this person been hurt by religion so much, by my religion, by Christianity so much that they are angry? And that's why they're taking it out. I know that because, I walk 2 identities. I'm gay and I'm Christian. And many LGBT people have been persecuted by the church so badly that they have suffered emotional and psychological scars to this day. Just mention the word God, they get an awful feeling. They get triggered. And I understand where that's coming from. The way to deal with that is not to react with defensiveness, but to react with love and wonder, how can I help you in what you're going through? And also realize that I am not responsible for the hurt that's inflicted on this person. I cannot apologize on behalf of the Christians who hurt this person, because I cannot. I can only be responsible for my own actions. I don't think that anyone, and this is something that we need to realize, we cannot expect someone of a certain faith to apologize on behalf of whatever some other people of their faith have done. That's kind of, I think this is the thing, we cannot expect our Muslim siblings in Singapore to apologize for what's being done by ISIS. I think that's a reality. And to me, I don't think they're even Muslim, in the true sense of the faith. I think that's something that we need to wrestle very hard with, to understand that we are all culpable. What is done in the name of religion it's done by people, and the people need to be accountable for it. And it may not necessarily be religion. I mean, religion says a lot of things. People may not necessarily have to carry it out. I mean, they say stone their adulterers. I don't think Christians stone their adulterers anymore. But hey, we don't carry some things out because we have learned, we have changed, we have evolved, we have grown. And that's may be how we need to grow. And these are the aspects of the religion that needs to be criticized and addressed and say, hey, you need to understand the historical, social context of this. And we need to live where we are now in this time, in this context, in this place. So that's where I come from. I mean, you can always dig out scripture to justify just about anything. In almost any religion, you can do that. Because it's text, you can put a text in any context in some way, right? But we need to look at the principles that is the core to the faith in some way. And in Christianity, I think, I really appreciated, was it last month, when Professor Farid Ishak came, he said that, if you can summarize Christianity into a word, a concept, it's love. And I think that I agree with him, and that's love. And he said something else that reminded me too, there's no such thing as a Christian, and there's no such thing as a Muslim. We're all Christian wannabes, and we're all Muslim wannabes, and probably Buddhist wannabes. We're trying to live out our faith. But we cannot either say that we are truly Christian or truly someone, but it is walking the path. Religion is the path that we live out. And we try our darndest. The people who keep claiming to be the most religious are the ones who are often not able to live up their faith, but just having those claims, and they try to act it out. They try to impose their views on someone else because they have not been taught. It's a difficult thing to be really Christian, to love your enemies and forgive those who hurt you. It's a struggle. I struggle. But it's an easy way to do other things that people might prescribe, like try to convert people on the streets, which I really think is really not helpful. And that's my personal experience, yeah.
Thank you, Miak. Suddenly I thought of a new role for the moderator, and that's to try to be as offensive as possible to the three people up here. Then you will know, their kung fu, right? Yeah. So, yes, it's the turn of the godless person now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that they're all becoming something, becoming a Christian, becoming a Muslim, becoming a Buddhist. We are always striving to be unbecoming. Yeah. How's that? So laugh at ourselves, that's fine. And for the atheists and the humanists out there, without religion, whatever, please flip to chapter 2 of our unholy book, God's Delusion, okay, where Sir Richard Dawkins said, okay, so we don't have a holy book, all right, we don't have a holy book, but we think that every culture, every religion has their creation story, has their flood story, and has their revelation or going to the next place story. Okay. We just don't think that we can, without anyone who has been there and back to tell us the real story, that we can accept those because of our accepting, using reason, accepting evidence, and using compassion. Those things didn't quite fit into our context of what that we should use to understand the world. And having said that, we sometimes are seen to be a religion And in that even, and this brings in a little bit of politics, is that when you have polities who talked about freedom of religion. So if you don't choose a religion, or you choose a religion or no God, religion or no God is a religion. And it makes us sort of, humanism is a religion or not a religion. But really, I don't think not believing in anything is a religion as much as not playing golf is a sports. Yeah. So all those things that comes to a head to us sometimes in trying to explain our situation, because it is somewhat subtle, that it doesn't quite come across to everybody so quickly. And abstinence is a sexual position. Okay, sex is right out there now. So it is not. Okay, abstinence is not a sexual position. And having said that, there is also that part, the fact that I use sex, meant that these people without religion, they are generally immoral. They are very supportive of LGBT. They're probably very, very for women's right and women's choice of control of their organs. Okay, they are very pro-choice than pro-life. So a lot of things that come back to us, not in terms of offense, we're being offended or anything, but that we're being classified as a bunch that is immoral. And I just wrote it today that someone who would say, not having a car might say that someone might not have money. But not having a religion is like saying that same person doesn't have morality. So there's a lot of things that are they are used as similes in Singapore, especially when it comes to car, money, religion, morality. It puts us in a position where we feel that we're not even quite there. And in the American society, you will see that the atheists and probably the gays, I guess, would be at the bottom two rungs of impressions, bad impressions in society. And that is sort of offensive. And it's something that we have to get back in. They're not necessarily saying anything straight onto our faces, but when you talk to someone and they find out that you don't have a religion, and they say, well, that's okay. And it's already a very condescending move that says that, darn, I thought I was speaking to a kindred, but he turned out to be an immoral person. Yeah. So all those things are what we feel that people are dishing it onto us, not with verbal, but with non-verbal signals. What do we say about the offensive and the non-offensive? We take these things and we try to turn it around in saying that not having a religion can also be moral. What does that say? That sometimes also brings the topic of reason and evidence into the whole realm of things, and it becomes a bunch of people who are generally perhaps smarter than the average population, who are telling the 80% of the population that they are dumb, that they have to take a religion to believe in something that is written in a millennium-old book and continue to believe in that. So that's sort of, again, the non-verbal offense that perhaps the religious feel that the non-religious are dishing back to them without saying it. Okay? But sometimes if we talk too much about Big Bang and evolution, it really puts them in a position where they feel offended because men was created in the image of God and can't be from single-cell organisms. So I think those are the things that our non-religious book, our non-faith tells us what we tend to be sending out there, and what we're also telling you, what you might be sending back to us in terms of how we feel being immoral and generally not of high social standings.
Thank you. Questions now? 1, 2, 3. Wow.
Hello. Yep, thank you. It's quite refreshing to hear from such a, I would say, moderate Muslims and forward-thinking Christians. Okay, it's not often I hear Christians, pastor especially, who admit that his books is full of contradictions and full of killings, and these are all true, and they are fine with it, you know. So it's quite refreshing in a sense. My question is from some of the comments that you all has mentioned. Imran especially that we learn much from criticism from others, and things about we are to be open to questions and each other. So my question to the panel actually is, what is your view on, this is actually, I got this question earlier before the part one part, is what is your view about Singapore's law regarding free speech? Because right now I feel that we in Singapore, I feel very constrained and fearful of speaking out speaking out of mind. Because little things then we can be taken to task. As you say, Amos is saying some things, he's a 16-year-old little boy, and yet he's had to be jailed, right? Just for being offensive to religion. But he was really offensive, especially the things that he did to the Quran. I don't know if you have seen the video.
Right, so
Yeah.
the question is...
So the question is, how is the view about Singapore's current law? Because I think we are I myself feel that it's very restrictive. I don't know about how you feel. Is it good enough? Is it just nice to maintain the religious harmony of Singapore? Or you feel that it should be more restrictive or it should be less restrictive? That is my questions on this.
And then we've got two gentlemen, and then if we have time, we'll take yours.
Yeah, hi. So basically, this is a rather recent experience, but I could pretty much generalize it. You know, the idea of taking offense. So like this previous Tuesday, it was the Islamic festival of Miraj, which is basically Prophet Muhammad flying to heaven on a winged horse. So I kind of posted on Facebook like, I said, you know, like in a satirical manner, I said, to the Buraq, which is, Buraq was the mythical horse that Muhammad allegedly rode. And so I had a Pakistani guy who came on my Facebook post, and he said, grow the fuck up. And I was like, you're the one who believes in a winged horse, and I'm the childish one. And to me, it goes like this, like, how do you get a point across, you know, like, to, you know, like everyone in this room, like you're in the 21st century. Do you literally believe that Muhammad flew to, you know, heaven on a winged horse? It's, you know, it sounds like believing in fairies or unicorns. So, like, how do you not, like, the idea is that anyone can take offense to something that is rather commonsensical to someone who lives in a modern age. You know, like, how do you, like, in the Singapore's case, like, if I said this maybe, you know, in a public place, I might have been, you know, prosecuted for it. Even though it's right there in the Quran, it's in the Hadith literature, you can talk about it, but you can't openly express that. And not just that, like, for example, let's talk about the killing verses in the Quran, for example. Like, I speak classical Arabic. I took a course on that.
So, sorry,
So
so your question
my question is, like, where do we draw the line of, you know, like, taking and giving offense when you're actually quoting religious scripture to rebut it?
Thank you.
And I just to add a little background, I'm like an ex-Muslim, an atheist now, so yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. The line.
Hi, thanks. I'll keep it.
Just a quick question with regards to giving and taking offense.
I think, can we just pass the other mic over, because they're doing the recording, so we want to really capture your question. Thank you for repeating that again.
No problem. I'll keep this short. With regards to giving and taking offense, can we ever justify violence, or how do we justify violence as a response to giving and taking offense?
Okay. So do you have your question is short? Yeah. So, sorry, can we have the fourth question?
My question is more directed to Tatt. When you mention atheism, as compared to other religions, in Singapore there's a law against offensive speech towards other religions. If atheism is classified as a religion, then people can be offensive towards you. Otherwise, they can't offend you in any way. What do you think of creating such a law?
Thank you. So, Should you? Yeah.
That's a simple one to answer.
Yeah,
so I'll answer that because it's directed at me. Well, even if they want to classify atheism as a religion, it's, again, the atheist may not subscribe to that. Yeah, and by calling it so, makes it so, is really not quite what we believe in. Yeah, so it's all right. Call it a religion, and there are some components of atheism or humanism, perhaps, that is religious in nature, in that we follow it quite strictly, like we always like to have evidence, use reason, and we like to take people out of their nonsensical ways. But we, again, have to live with the greater population, and we will have to harmonize and reconcile. So we don't always operate in one mode, but we always have to be quite a wide spectrum. Call us whatever you want. We don't care.
I think between me and Imran would be fun to do that, because to respond, I think the questions all can be lumped together because they're related. It's related to how we govern, or how the law governs speech in general in Singapore, speech against religions in general. For myself, I think that it is an infantile reaction to protect people from being offended, or I think there's a line to be drawn. The line is when there's violence. Inciting violence against somebody, saying that someone should be killed because they said something, I think that's where I draw the line. Even suggesting that, Jonas, can you adjust the volumes? Even suggesting that someone should be killed, I think that, no, I think that's totally unacceptable. Someone should be beaten up or whatnot. I think that's where I'm very, very clear. But everything else should be fair game. I think that we should not be so afraid or reactive. The onus is on all the religions to educate their people. I mean, if someone says that, Jesus didn't get resurrected, I'm going like, you don't believe it lah. That's you. But it's a different thing. I mean, that's something that we need to respect, that there's a difference. You don't believe in the same thing that I do. You don't live the way that I do. You don't follow the same rules. I think that should be fine. Why should I be affected when, and this is a question we need to ask, why are people affected, all the way from Pakistan by something you posted? Is it that you posted onto, you entered into their territory? For example, I think that it would be very offensive to bring pork into a mosque. I think that's really, really, you're asking for it. I think that this person is really violating, civil boundaries. But commenting and posting on my own space, I think that should be fine when I'm saying what I believe and what I don't believe. I think that's perfectly fine. And sometimes you'll be surprised at how much in common that we have. I mean, Tassi mentioned the Big Bang and evolution. I subscribe to that too. The Pope says this, the Pope is for it. I mean, we need to realize that there's a diversity in all the religions regarding such issues. And not all people, the people who are reacting often may be the thin-skinned ones. And maybe they are struggling with their own faith. And the only way that they can act out to be the faithful is to attack those who are unfaithful, or the people who are, or to become the defenders of the faith. Then they will feel good about themselves. And that may come from low self-esteem and other issues. They might be from it might be a social, economic background, a cultural background they are from, and that the only way they can feel superior to someone else is because I have something that you don't. I am a follower of the faith. Yeah.
The law.
Oh, the law. I think for all of us, for Singapore to mature, we need to be able to engage in civil dialogue and criticism of each other's faith. I think that it should be fair ground to say that, you know what, you shouldn't impose this onto other people. I think that there should be a bigger civil space to speak out. And just because it's suppressed doesn't mean that this speech does not exist. What happens is that it's suppressed and it goes underground, and we cannot deal with these kind of attitudes. these chauvinistic attitudes that we have, it is when we encounter people who are different, people who hold different beliefs than we do, that we learn. And we learn how to coexist. When we start suppressing it, we do not know how to interact with one another. And we encounter difference, only thing we know, call police. That's really ridiculous. But when we learn, and by modeling, by learning, by someone teaching, how to engage, when we have never done it before, how do we sit down and talk properly instead of shouting at each other? How, when a person is being shoved, instead of taking the storm video, you stand up for that person instead of calling the police? These are the things that I think as a society we need to learn. We cannot remain as an infantile society. We need to mature. And mature will be messy. Maturity comes with messiness. Maturity means that at some level the government needs to give up some level of control. But the line needs to be a lot lower than what it is now. I think the line is where, when you incite violence against somebody, this is where I draw the line. Anything else, I don't need to defend my faith. I don't think I need to. Just because you say something that, criticizing what I believe doesn't mean that I have to react. Yeah.
I think you are giving not an interpretation, but like the law is there, but it's up to us to. Not everything can be solved by the law, right? I mean, if the society is mature enough to not invoke the law, then isn't it better, right? So you're kind of like filling that space up, which is really so vital for us to grow and mature. So Imran, very difficult questions.
Yeah, it's very difficult questions. Where do we draw the line first? You see, contestations of ideas to me is a natural process and natural part of society. So, it's not just across Muslim and other faiths, but amongst Muslims themselves, they even debate whether Buraq is real or metaphorical, whether Muhammad went on a physical journey or it's more of a dreamlike state. So even Muslims argue amongst themselves on the nature of this Isra Miraj, as you're probably aware of. So I think it's a natural part of religion to always engage in contestations of interpretations and ideas. And there's no line really, unless, of course, it crosses into an area that has a society we agree on, and that has been touched by Miak when it comes to incitement for violence. Has, for example, how some Muslim communities will incite violence against Muslim minority groups, even like the Ahmadis or the Shias. Now, those are no-no. Those is where we draw the line. Or even in the West, for example, with the rise of Islamophobia, where incitement to do violence against other minorities, including Muslim minorities, or towards the Jews, or towards any other vulnerable groups like the LGBT. So this is where we draw the line. That will include also hate speeches, which I am inclined not to have a kind of laissez-faire situation where everything is fair game. It's not. You do have to protect vulnerable communities and to protect them from certain aspect of speeches that will lead to repression, oppression, discrimination, and other vulnerable. It impacts on their safety, basically. Yeah. But I am not inclined to accept any legislation that punishes someone on the basis that a member of society feels offended. Being offended should not be a case to prosecute someone. That's my personal view. Yeah, because firstly, it's difficult to make a case that, especially offense against Muslims, for example, because you find that, or any other group, Christians or whoever, you find that in that society, not everyone will be offended. If you say, Amos actually offended the Muslims, who are the Muslims who are offended? Right? Not every Muslim will be offended. There will be those who are offended. So how does the law actually come into play in terms of trying to generalize as if all Muslims are offended? Then that is more dangerous because then it wedges the divides in society. Then you have these further stereotypes. Muslims really cannot accept little bit of criticisms and all that. Yeah. So it perpetuates certain stereotypes, and that's dangerous. Yeah. Secondly, of course, you have to prove at the court of the point of intention, or there's actual intention to actually create mischief and to do that. But intention is something that is very, very difficult to prove in a court of law. So it's very problematic. Yeah. Third, and I think this is quite important, and this has been touched by Professor Sharon George in his latest book, Head Spin. If you go on the basis of being offended, then you open up to extremist groups to further their agenda by claiming that they are offended in order to go on the offensive and offend other people. And we are seeing this happening in various countries. He analyzed, I think, 4 societies that is going through this process that he calls it as hate spin. In Indonesia, in America, in India, and one more country I forgot. So he did these case studies where extremist groups actually use hate speech laws to claim that whatever, even though valid criticisms or even slight remarks against the religious community is something that they feel offended, and that gives them the legitimacy to mobilize the ground, to protest and to further raise their stake, to put them as the legitimate representative of the religion, to then launch an offensive against other communities for offending them. Yeah, so it's a very complicated process. It's subject to politicization, and it also has been used by political parties to further their own political interests. So this is very dangerous if we go on that downslide of taking seriously anyone who claims that they are offended and acting upon it. Yeah. Yeah, I think that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we just can we justify violence to person who gives offense? No.
All right, so, yeah, Tatt, you want to add?
All right. So also in answering the other few questions, the intent part is very, very crucial, because of what that speech intends to do. I think if you can trace back to what that is, it is an action, and it can be incitement. And I think by using that, you can already kind of draw the line of whether it's really just expressing it or inciting people to do things, or inciting things to come onto people. I'd like to quote this. Eleanor Roosevelt has said this. She said that great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. And small minds discuss people. And I think if we use that, coupled with what we tend to use, which is evidence and reason, hopefully we can have a good conversation, a positive, healthy conversation going. And some of the ways, you could call me Teflon Man, because nothing wears with me. I don't have a holy book, I don't have anything, and things just seem to bounce off me. And also chairs going under me.
Literally now,
Literally,
be careful, you are in
I think God is looking.
Yeah, you're in a church, be careful.
It's a trap.
It's a trap, okay. But the thing is also this, is that we are less than 20%, but 80% is sort of against us. And it's sort of a nice position to be in sometimes, because we sometimes go play the Monty Hall game, which is if there are 10 of you out there, 9 of you are wrong. If you're talking about monotheistic religions. That's sometimes what we play on, which is sort of a philosophical game. And sometimes we also play the victim's card. Well, we're not invited to bless the MRT trains. Yeah, stuff like that. But I think the other thing is to the gentleman at the back saying rather restrictive. There's no expression, freedom of expression. I think it might be in our mind as well. If you continue to use reason, you continue to use evidence, and then you kind of scale back on that intent part and not focus on trying to hurt the person or create an event which is, Hong Lim Park or whatever, I think you're fine, in my opinion. And that sometimes it's just in our head that we feel that we don't have those freedom to do those things and kind of feel oppressed that way. And I think what we're doing here is exactly what I will advise going forward, is to push push the envelope a little bit further. Yeah, to push it a little bit further and see where it goes, and then see whether there's any kickback, and then maybe society can go that way with this event and with some of the things we do out there.
Thank you, Tatt. We've got one more segment to go, and from the looks of time, the speakers probably can finish by 10 o'clock, but like I said, the question and answer part is really what we're looking forward towards. So if you can stay, that would be fantastic, maybe for another 15 or even 30 minutes, yeah, but we will address that later. If you've got people picking you up, maybe you can invite them to come up or something, but yeah, because the last segment is, I think is so important, right, because it addresses the issue of how, and I would like to kind of put the speakers on the spot here a little bit, to perhaps suggest, in addition to you sharing about your religion of how, since we're living in a very pluralistic society, are there something else that other religions or the atheists can do as well? Yeah, so it's always a two-way street, right? It's never a one-way street, yeah. So if you can add that in, that would be great, because in one of the workshops that I did, people were so afraid, and these are trainee teachers, right? So they're educated people, young people. They were so afraid of saying anything that may be offensive when it comes to religion and race that you end up not saying anything at all. And this kind of silence, we've all established, right? And engagement is the only way to go. Singaporeans are already too passive-aggressive in many, many issues. And I think race and religion, particularly religion, is something too precious for us to go down that road. So definitely engagement. So, Tatsi, let's hear from you.
Right. The final segment is so gracious, Miak, giving me his mic, charging his own. Show of hands here. Who thinks the couple at Toa Payoh should be arrested? Okay, flip it the other way around. Who think that they should not be arrested? All right, so majority would think that they should not be arrested. I think that is sort of the sentiment up here, if I'm not wrong. All right, if I can gauge that, and I think that's something that's really important, because we choose a government that chooses that influences us, and I think the cycle goes that way too. So if we continue to report police on situations like that, the government and the enforcement, sometimes I say government as too big a thing. There's enforcement, there's also the judiciary, different branches of government. We embolden the big G. And I think the big G over here, when I say government, it's the other dogma that needs to be in the picture. I will only say it insofar as when it relates to offense. But they clearly have a very, very big role to play in this. I'll bring the concept of Trinity into this whole offense and being offended thing. In that it's really not a Trinity, it's a triangle, it's a diamond. It's the triangle of burning. Okay, what does it take to burn something, to have something burning? There are three components. Who can name them? Fuel, heat, and oxygen. So fuel is the thing you burn, heat is the temperature, and the last one is oxygen. The government is very, very good at taking the oxygen out of the entire equation. And you can see that sort of as free speech. So you can't air your stuff when it comes to very, very sensitive issues. But at the same time, sometimes they go back and they stir a little bit of things because they pander on both sides. They don't really come out to say which religion is right or wrong. They can't because they need 80% of the vote. Yeah. But they pander to both sides. Sometimes they'll come out and they say, oh, these Islamic radicals and this and that. And then next day they'll say, please look at the issue known as Islamophobia. Because these people are now being discriminated upon when they should not be. And so they play both sides of the streets, and it sort of, to me, has a little bit of stirring that that compound, that fuel part, either to make it a little hotter so they can put it out or reduce the temperature, the heat, or they kind of cool it down a little bit by whatever mixture they want to put in there. The humanist or the atheist side of the house is not to take the air out of this whole equation, but to really take the fuel away. So if some of these things are there, what is a religious problem? Religious problem involves religion. So if religion is not part of the picture, perhaps there isn't that religious problem. So that's a sort of how we kind of proceed on trying to convince people to use reason, because in a lot of ways we feel that faith is making a virtue of not needing evidence, of believing anything you want. And if that's the case, then people can really run wild with their imaginations. And if that is the case, then it's very difficult to have a rational conversation. And by taking things, again, back to rationality, we always start a conversation by saying, now, can we agree to use reason? And when we are there, we can begin to maybe reduce a lot of that fuel that is either from this holy book or that holy book, and begin to talk reason and to talk people. And I think people are generally reasonable if they can find the correct reason to go on. So what can we do? I think the process is a long one. We cannot expect the government to open up everything right away. But I think it is something that we must begin to have more of these conversations, people pushing the envelope a little bit more, using reason, using evidence. And a lot of the things I like to end, say on my Facebook or in a lot of arguments is to end it with a question, because you can either be asking that person or you can be asking yourself back. And I think that's perhaps a way of going forward, because do you really think he went to heaven on a horse? And that is sort of a rhetorical question to me. Yeah, to me. Yeah, to him it might not be. So I'll cut that short here and I'll leave it to the rest.
Oh. I'll go next. Like Tatt, I'm very concerned with the mob justice. I think that so many people reacting emotionally about something, and then the government taking action. I don't think that's. I think that's exactly what happened with Amos-y, and then they lose face if they step back a little bit. I don't think they will lose face in my opinion, but they had to. They already started something they couldn't stop. I think that the people who are triggered and will report are the minority. The rest of us who raised our hands just now, who think that they shouldn't be persecuted, are normally the ones who just, they need to be they need to be counseled. We need to talk to them. We need to show them that this is actually not right. But we often don't speak up. I think that there is onus on us who are moderates here. Just now someone called me a moderate. Christian, moderate. I don't know whether I'm moderate or not. I don't know how moderate I am. But I think that all moderate voices, whether religious or atheist, need to speak up, and need to speak up openly about issues that matter to us to show that we are matured enough. The government, without hearing the evidence from the ground that we are mature enough to handle these things, will always err on the side of caution. So one of the examples I'll tell you, and I'm very moved by it because this is uniquely Singapore, right? We are apparently the most religiously diverse country in the world. Okay? And all of you, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the ban for Thaipusam for them to play music along the route. Okay? This has been banned since, I don't know when, 1970s or something, a long time ago. The ban was lifted last year, if I'm not wrong. But before that, there was a few people writing in to ask why is music being banned? Because in Chinese New Year, we have this lion dance also create noise pollution. What? Why are we banning? And then a lot of people actually felt that it was a racist thing, right? It was racist and it was really, this is their religious procession. There should be music. And the people who wrote in were not Hindus. The people who wrote in were normal folk who are a-religious or religious or, the diversity of people who wrote in, who did not follow the faith, but believe in the right of someone else to practice their faith in their own way. I want to be part of that country. Not one who jump into defensive posture and go, shut that person out, I don't want to hear that person. I think that is the kind of society I long for and aspire to be part of. And what we need to do is participate as a civil society to say that, hey, I may not agree with your beliefs. Your beliefs might be as alien to me and as ridiculous to me as whatever. But I respect your right to practice it in a way that does not impinge on other people in some way. I mean, this is just a procession along the road for one day, right? So this is the kind of live and let live that we need to participate in, and we need to voice out to let the government know, let the people in power know, hey, don't be so insecure lah. But if we keep calling police to report anything that goes wrong, then we are perpetuating the idea that the government needs to hold a tighter rein on things. And that is this dimension that I want to talk about, which with regards to the legal structure or how we govern and how we operate together as a society. The other side is this, that we can only build relationship across with each other as neighbors when it is a two-way street. Just now you were talking about vulnerability. Vulnerability cannot come on its own. Vulnerability needs to be encountered with empathy. There needs to be someone on the other side holding that space to be safe for someone to be vulnerable and to admit, it is a safe environment. If you're in an environment if I am in an environment where I will have trolls here and people say, you are not a real pastor, you are gay, and then we can discount everything that you say, then I will be in defensive posture. That's a reality. So we need to think about how we encounter each other. We may not agree with each other's beliefs. We might, say, we might make fun of some of the ridiculous stuff in our text or whatnot. But that doesn't mean that we bring it up onto the table, because that's not meeting with empathy. That's meeting vulnerability with ridicule. I think that's a very important part. I mean, I tried to, make fun of people before, for those who think gay is not okay, and then I would point out, but you have people who are adulterous in your congregation, your pastor's daughter, got a child of wedlock, hello, all these things are quite, it doesn't make sense, right? You are blind, you are very alert with the splinter in someone's eye, but not alert to the lock in your own. But I think that will not be healthy in the way of engagement. When we encounter the person who might be attacking us, if we are able to hold the safe space and empathize and say, you know what, we disagree, but that doesn't mean that you should get angry with me. Maybe we can agree on what we can, what we disagree, we may not want to talk about, but what we can agree on is how are we going to live in this secular society? This pluralistic secular society that we call Singapore, how can we live and allow everyone to thrive? Every single person, regardless of religion. That's in our pledge. Regardless of religion. And that includes people with no religion. And how are we going to do that? And we need to hold ourselves to that as citizens of Singapore. I mean, my faith is one thing. That doesn't mean that I need to bash you on the head for mine. And that may help them to become more secure in their own faith. The irony is that someone who of a different faith can help you become more faithful. It's a paradox. And when I got to know Imran, I got more, by encountering him, I got to know a lot more about my own tradition. I get to know a lot about his tradition, where the similarities are and where the differences are. And I grow. I grow deeper. I'm not shaken. Actually grow deeper. That's weird or odd. As I encounter people, yeah.
You're stirred, not shaken.
Stirred. And I think that happens when we encounter people who are different from us. They can either cause conflict or make us better. We have a choice. And I think it's very, very important that we recognize we have the choice to decide whether I'm going to get angry or I can learn something from this. And that's a transformation process that we need to go on to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, Tatsi, you keep on mentioning that humanists rely on reason and evidence, yeah? Yeah. I can't help noticing that people might misconstrue that in the sense that therefore people of religion do not rely on evidence nor reason. This is the false dichotomy that we often see in many engagements where the same stereotypes are again being perpetuated. I know that's not what you meant, but it might be construed that way. I disagree on one point when you say that the Islamic radicalism and Islamophobia, these are things that are stirred by the government in that sense, because I see this as real problems. Both the problem of extremism and radicalism that is actually growing more acute in Muslim societies. At the same time also, I won't deny Islamophobia is also on the rise and it's also causing a lot of harm, particularly in situations where Muslims are minorities. So using the golden standard of the humanists, you need to provide more evidence on this.
Ooh, ouch.
Now, how we should move forward? I think we need more safe spaces like this, yeah? So someone was mentioning earlier, you know, you feel scared to discuss issues of religion because you do not want to offend or you do not want to be misconstrued in the sense that that person might feel offended and therefore get into trouble and all that. That is precisely why safe spaces like this needs to be created more and more. And I'm happy to note that actually there are more safe spaces that are being created, both at the governmental level and also by individual initiatives or small group initiatives that are mushrooming in Singapore, particularly I think after 2006, when the government loosened up a bit and allows for community engagement program to come in. So we must occupy those spaces and utilize those spaces to actually bring up issues like this to be discussed in a very mature and civil ways. And I think that can be done as long as we can remain respectful and allow disagreements, but establish that human connection. And if we can show how we can do this properly, then the government might even see that, hey, this is a way forward, you know, rather than trying to curtail such discussions. We ourselves have to take up the mantle and show it, yeah? And I'm glad that today's session is one way of trying to do that. But at the same time also, I'm quite critical of people who are just obsessed with this whole notion of free speech. In the sense, I mean, of course, I'm pro free speech, of course, but we cannot just talk about free speech without also trying to address what is a good speech. Yeah, because otherwise then we lose this whole balance of you can say anything you like even though it might cause harm to society. So as much as we allow that freedom, we must also discuss now, moving forward, what constitutes a good speech? What kind of conversations do we want? What kind of dialogues do we want? And how do we talk across our differences? So that needs to be ironed out. Because I think no society also accept this notion of absolute free speech. Yeah, even in European societies, in liberal democracies, even, you know, in some European countries, because of the experience, you can't make remarks that are construed to be anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic, yeah, against the Jews, for example, and you can be jailed for that, yeah, because of the European experience of going through the Holocaust and all other aspects of history. So similarly, many of our laws in place are also historical constructs, yeah. Our sedition law, including our Internal Security Act, these are British laws emerging out of the racial riots, emerging out of the emergency, etc. But what is important is to allow the natural evolution of society. And to do that, we must allow space for contestation of ideas and engagement, and we can learn from that process. any authoritarian way of trying to stifle discussions on contentious issues may have long-term negative consequences, and we need to recognize that. Firstly, it might stunt the maturity of society to deal with differences. The more we stifle it, the more we are not able to deal with our differences, and the more we will see pathological things coming out, and that is what we are observing in social media. Yeah, people are commenting in crazy ways on Facebook and all that because they are not used to dealing with differences in mature ways, because that space has been very lacking for the last few decades. Yeah. Secondly, it might even widen the divide when you don't allow engagement, because one simply entrench their position as this vis-a-vis that. There is no even any attempt to engage and discuss and try to understand each other's point of view. You just say, okay, I'm different from that. This is my position, that's your position. And no engagement means you will deepen that divide. And that's very dangerous in the long-term process of our society. Third, it makes society passive and dependent on the Leviathan. This is what Tatt was mentioning earlier, the big G. Yeah? Often, we ourselves want to be coddled by the power. Yeah? This is where everything also make police report, you know, because we do not want to deal with small differences or, you know, difficult issues that we are having with our neighbors. We just call the police, let the police deal with that. But imagine if we know how to deal with small differences, we can iron things out. We don't have to involve even the authorities. Yeah? But it is our failure to take responsibility ourselves that is at the root cause of it. Yeah? Fourth, we might be susceptible to manipulations or what I've described earlier, hate spin. I am offended, so now I have the right to go on a rampage or moral outrage to now offend you. Yeah, so this is very dangerous in long-term development of society. Now, I want to introduce not a concept. Yeah, James Tooley and Chantal Mouffe use this term democratic provisionality. This has been discussed earlier in some other forums, in IPS, for example. It's not just about that safe space, but also when we provide that safe space, it's important for us to ask who is not invited to the table. To democratize that space so that we will have as diverse representations and voices as possible. This is where, when I reach out to Humanist Society last year, it's also out of this concern that interfaith dialogue has not opened up its door to people who constitute 18.5% of the population. And they certainly have significant things to say about religion too, even though they do not have any religion. So we need to bring them into the table as equals to discuss issues that will affect us all in terms of public policy developments, in terms of laws, etc. Yeah? Because the government do consult religious groups to get their views on certain issues that they are rolling out, but then these policies may impact people with no religion, but we are not listening to their voices. Yeah? And then it creates a false dichotomy as though, oh, people of religion are against repeal of 377A. All these humanists and these secularists, they are for repeal of 377A. It creates a false dichotomy again when we know that there are people in religion or religious people who are also supportive of repeal of 377A, and there are also equally homophobic humanists, atheists, and agnostics who want that law to be maintained. Yeah? So we need to cut across all these stereotypes and these generalizations, and that can only happen if we bring everyone to the table as diverse as possible. Yeah? And then through that negotiation process, we must also understand that any decision is never cast in stone in any public policy issue. Yeah? So this allows for groups to see themselves as adversaries but not as enemies, and therefore they will continuously struggle for their own interests instead of just saying, I give up with this society, I'm just going to migrate. And this is what we are seeing when people do not see the democratic provisionality of public policies and they say, okay, so this is all cast in stone. There's no point fighting for this society anymore, I'm going to leave. And that in the long-term process is also going to be very problematic for our country. Because we need to allow for robust disagreements that can lead to better solutions. The more diversity we have, the more we can leverage on the strength of the different opinions that can be offered at the table. And also it gives the nimbleness and the agility to gear out our public policy to meet the different challenges in different contexts if we listen to as many voices as possible. Yeah. Now there is this, I will end by saying there's this one very interesting book that you might want to take a look by Timothy Garton Ash. I have it there, but this thick, it's like a Bible. He gave 10 commandments of if you are into this whole notion of wanting to protect that freedom of speech while at the same time maintaining good speech in society, then he said there are 10 principles out there. Number 1, we are all human beings and must be free and able to express ourselves and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas regardless of frontiers. Number 2, we neither make threats of violence nor accept violent intimidation. Number 3, we allow taboos against and seize every chance for the spread of knowledge. Number 4, we require uncensored, diverse, trustworthy media so that we can make well-informed decisions and participate fully in political life. Number 5, we express ourselves openly and with robust civility about all kinds of human differences. Number 6, we respect the believer but not necessarily the content of the belief. Yeah? Because we have to admit, there are certain beliefs that we can't really respect, yeah? But it's important to respect that person who actually expressed that belief because he or she is an individual human being just like us. Number 7, we must be able to protect our privacy and counter slurs on our reputations, but not prevent scrutiny that is in the public interest. Number 8, we must be empowered to challenge all limits to freedom of information justified on such grounds as national security. Number 9, we defend the internet and other systems of communication against illegitimate encroachments by both public and private powers. And number 10, we decide for ourselves and face the consequences ourselves. These are important pointers that are worth discussing and mulling over for us, because Timothy Garton Ash was actually writing this for the European audience. He's based in the UK, but there are many pointers that we can actually go deeper if we want to carry this conversation forward. And I would like to invite Humanist Society and even FCC to continue this conversation and see whether we can flesh out more things out of this suggestion of Timothy Garton Ash. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Imran. I really want to appreciate. Okay, good. Listening to Imran speak, right, I always learn so much. And then I get stressed because that means I've got so much to do now. To learn, but to just bring it back to the Buddhist community. And then how do we understand what, especially the last 10 points that you said, and then what is the responsibility of us in delivering, some of the points, right? But I just want to be respectful of everyone's time as well. We've kind of gone a little bit over 10 o'clock. If anyone needs to urgently go back, we understand, and then, please feel free to do so. But I think the finale will be extremely exciting. So if I can have everyone's time for is it all right if we stay for another half an hour? 15 minutes, all right? So, but if you have to go, please feel free to go. But before you go, can I just quickly ask for a show of hands? How many of us here are participating in an interfaith discussion like this, either for the first time or for the first time in the past year? So from now to last April. Wow, so successful organizers. Take a look. Thank you very much for your effort and to come here. It means a lot to us because this is really the first concrete step it's not the first concrete step, but it's one concrete step that we're taking, right, to move forward. So I cannot say thank you enough to you. One last question before I open up questions to you all. How many of us here you would consider that you do take into consideration in terms of your everyday life, be it at work or in your faith work or just as a person, just as an individual? How many of you would consider that you do take into that you are conscious of interfaith the importance of interfaith harmony and importance of openness, and you kind of like, either you're conscious in wanting to learn more, or you actually are doing something about it in your own capacity. How many of us would consider ourselves like that? Like you feel that you're responsible for it, and woohoo! Thank you. This is very important encouragement for us. It's very important motivation, right? So hopefully in future events, it will not just be the few people up here. It will be like circles of dialogues, and that we can all learn from each other, right? But okay, now
can I have a shameless plug? Imran and myself are involved with a small group that Reverend Yap kickstarted some time ago. It's an interfaith. Everybody actually, interpath. We wanted to call it interpath, but that doesn't sound very nice. So we are MAP, Movement Affirming Pluralism. It's a mouthful. And you can find us on Facebook. The website link is a bit long, so I cannot remember. But we are on Facebook, MAP. You can just search Movement Affirming Pluralism. Add us, and then I think in future events, we try to share all our events because we want to build this momentum. To build something. I think something is happening, yeah.
Yeah, in short, it's MAP, right? Yeah, I haven't opened his email yet. So, questions regarding how? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 questions. 5, 6. Okay, stress. Shall we have, yeah, is that, yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm from Cambodia. In Cambodia context, before I take in the question, I'd like to explain a little bit so that the speaker can catch up the question. In Cambodia, if someone say to somebody that they have no religious, it is very, very serious word. So back to our discussion, I'd like to ask the speaker that whether it is the same situation in Singapore like Cambodia, that people who have no faith in any religion also being offended, and in a really serious way. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. I think there's 1, 2, and then 2 in front.
I'm not sure if mine is a question or a comment. I'm thinking that living in such a diverse society as ours, many of us have grown up confused and changing religions and belief systems. I would prefer to call it belief systems. We would have traveled several, our journeys are all different. I'm just thinking aloud whether well, number one, how to guard ourselves against absolute truth claims, whether it is of the religious sort or the no religion sort. I happen to deal with evidence-based work as well, but I'm also an anthropologist and I understand people's belief systems. I love literature, etc., etc. So I'm just wondering whether how to resist absolute truth claims by all these groups out there or individuals out there. And perhaps one way out is to arrive at, for ourselves individually, to combine, I know it sounds terrible, to combine different ways of looking at things so that we can both appreciate the imaginative, the literary, the religious, as well as evidence. I always make my students, give me your evidence, show me your evidence, okay? But at the same time, I do not deny that people are out there with all these belief systems that have generated beautiful thoughts, beautiful writings, belief systems that lead them to do good. So I was a bit taken aback by you, Tatt, when you said that 80% people out there who are against are 20%. I don't think this society is like that. I think many of us in our own homes, some of us come from very diverse religious backgrounds, in our own family or extended family. We may have our quarrels, but I think we have ways of dealing with it, and maybe that's the way forward, rather than any clear spelled out path one way. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. There's two here, and then there's more and more. Okay, yeah.
Hi, thank you. It's not a question, rather it's about affirmation. Thank you all. Especially I salute to Reverend Miak for being openly gay. And I wish that within the interfaith of Islam, I wish there is any ustaz or ustaza, any religious teacher would claim I'm gay in a safe space. Really, I wish that will come true. Because being brave is something that I feel sad within my own religion because hypocrisy is still there, you know. And I wish that slowly in this millennial world, I hope, being a Muslim, you should be brave being who you are. And secondly, that I would love to hear this kind of open space, safe space for Muslim community to talk more about how to how should I say, to unlearn the sacred context in the Quran that's applied within today's world. Not upgrading like, you know, Apple computer, that kind of sort, but to unlearn yourself, to understand Islam in a more diverse way. Like, for example, the inheritance law. Does it apply today that women needs to get less than men? Or the Sodom and Gomorrah, does it only apply for LGBT? Or is it applies to rape and bestiality? That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady in front, right?
Hi, thank you. As a student, I find that nowadays there is a real outreach culture in school. So every bad idea or idea that quote-unquote opposes the general population is always shut down. Like, for example, I have a friend who is an atheist. So he's always very afraid to come out to people to tell them that, hey, I'm atheist. So no one actually took the time to listen to his point of view and ask him, why do you turn atheist? So what can I do as a student to promote intellectual diversity amongst my counterparts? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, just to be quick about it, just to ask once again about the question of moderates, because I'm reminded of a quote by W.B. Yeats, right, who said that the best lack all conviction while the worst are full of passionate intensity. So how can we mobilize the moderates? Because by nature they are reticent. So how can we do that effectively? Thank you.
I have a question for Imran. I'm always interested to this the identity between ethnic Malay and Islam. They always say to be interlinked, right? And so, what is your personal view about this concept of murtad in Islam, and how do you defend someone who is supposed to be murtad or apostasy? Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you. And then
related to what he just asked. How do you move, because it's about how you move forward to offensive remarks and behaviors. And on a more personal level, not related to me because my family is very irreligious, but what if your family is religious and they find your remarks and behavior offensive just because you don't follow the same behaviors?
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate and say, is there a good thing in saying offense? And for this, I would quote Rage Against the Machine, let the riot be the rhyme of the unheard. Because and this is just a thought. For example, if a person of power kind of deny, say, a genocide happening in their country, read Aung San Suu Kyi, and can we then take offense? Because their comments and their thoughts will affect a lot of people, perception of the situation. So is there a space and time to kind of take offense?
thank you. Imran, should you start? Because I think, yeah.
It's a lot of questions. Saiful. Whether there can be a good thing to be offended. Yes, if you are talking about some kind of anger at injustices, at things that are not right, then I think that's legitimate. Human responses are natural, and also it depends on the value system within that person. For example, if someone were to oppress against someone else who's a minority or marginalized, etc., the poor, etc., then if you don't feel anything about it, then it speaks volumes about your lack of ethical system. Yeah, so to be angry at that situation is legitimate and even called for, because it's the only proper response to a moral situation like that. But how you channel that anger is something else. Some people may go into raising more awareness through writing. Some people will try to mobilize communities to address that situation. As long as that response does not lead to violence, I think that is where I will draw that line. Although in some situation, for example, Frantz Fanon is a good example where he argued there's no way you can avoid violence in a situation when you have to defend your community against another bigger violence of oppression against the blacks. For example, this was way back in the decolonizing phase. Yeah, those kind of situations are tricky, but I will still go the path of Martin Luther King and Gandhi and try to avoid violence as much as possible. Now, offense within the family, this is difficult. Sometimes I get offended by many things, especially in family WhatsApp group, right? People send a lot of things that, oh, come on. But then you can't leave that WhatsApp group because then, hey, what's wrong, Imran? Why are you leaving? So I've learned to just sometimes, some battles are just, you don't have to fight all battles. Some things you can ignore for the greater sake. But of course, the education and the engagement process in subtle ways and in various other means can be done. I think I don't have a solution to that. Every individual would know how to deal within their own context of family relations. Apostasy in Islam, I've written a paper on that. I can give you that link later. But in short, I don't agree to any form of punishment for someone who leaves Islam. In fact, most Muslim scholars today will agree that there is no such thing as death penalty for anyone who leaves Islam. Yes, in the medieval period, there are those rulings, but then contemporary modern scholars have developed a whole set of new arguments to say there's no way you can punish someone who leaves Islam. And most Muslim countries are signatories to the Human Rights Convention, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that accords religious freedom, which is not just freedom of religion, but freedom from religion also. So this needs to be protected and strengthened in Muslim societies. And I will come out and defend someone who wants to leave Islam out of his or her own free will. That person has the right to do that. And we should allow that process if that person really believes that Islam is not the religion anymore for that person. How to mobilize the moderate? I think we are living in a modern situation where individuals are being atomized. They lack a certain relations to communities. Yeah. So in order to empower the moderates, yeah, one way is to actually build communities of people and to empower them with the right tools and resources in order to be able to speak up and be able to address certain issues without being cowed or without being beaten down by the small minority voices who are loud and extremists. I think this is the problem. And I see this happening in social media, for example, in the local Malay Muslim community, where extremist voices, they are very small, but they will dominate these social media platforms and they will go 24/7. I mean, people like us, we have work to do, right? We don't have time to reply to, sometimes you just say one sentence and then they will come out with their whole set of arguments and within 5 minutes, how do you keep up with that? And they've been dominating many of these platforms that eventually moderates also feel, I got no time to deal with this, so they leave. And then that space is ceded to the extremist voices. So this is dangerous, but I think I don't have a solution to that, but one way is actually to start and find like-minded people, build communities, strengthen it, and also to provide more platforms for people to speak on such matters without feeling scared. What can I do to promote diversity among students? Get in touch with many of the groups that are actually discussing many of these critical issues and find out more about them, and provide your own platforms even, yeah? As student groups, nothing to stop you from actually organizing your own study groups, discussion groups to address these issues, discuss it, and train yourself in the whole process of diversifying the intellectual engagements. You can do that, but there are also existing groups that you can leverage on. I'm always sad to hear your story, but I think, yeah, I do agree. Muslim community need to really talk amongst ourselves. There's a lot of issues that are unresolved, and we are always susceptible to this politics of representation. Everyone wants to represent the Muslim community, from left to right, yeah? And it's not helping, because we know, and the government needs to acknowledge, and everyone needs to acknowledge that the Muslim community is never a monolithic whole. It comprises of various intersectionalities, different views and opinions, various forms of religious orientations, and the more we acknowledge that, and faster we acknowledge that, the better it'll be to actually discuss intra-faith issues amongst ourselves. Grow up and confuse change. Sorry, Aing. Yes, sometimes we need not get trapped in this whole enlightenment process of just basing on reason, evidence, very positivistic approach even, yeah? Because we need to learn also how individuals and societies also leverage on a lot of narratives, stories, even myths that may convey certain values, the same kind of values that we want, but not through reasoning and evidence and all that, but it's through stories, through sharing of narratives, even though they may not be, they may be metaphorical, etc. There are values in there, yeah. And it has worked in many communities, yeah. Because the more you uproot them from this narrative approach, then you make them confront with a reality that is scary to them. They cannot make sense of the world. The rise of religious fundamentalism is because of this need to make sense of the changing modern context, transiting from traditional society to a modern society. And they have lost that myth-making story that then they leverage onto another set of myths that are destructive actually. So we need to really approach this beyond just the evidence rationality approach, and also to look into the psycho-emotional approach. Jonathan Haidt has this very important book, The Righteous Mind, how good people are divided over religion and politics. We need to recognize not everyone, including people who are self-professed to be rationalists, approach every issue in a rational manner. This is what he calls the liberal bias. People like Habermas and all that, when discussing deliberative democracy, right? People normally approach something not from the standpoint, okay, let's reason this out, and then they come to their conclusion. Most of the time, people submit to their psychological conditions or reactions first. People who saw a cockroach doesn't start to think, okay, should I be afraid of this cockroach or not? Right? When they saw a cockroach, there's a certain disgust first, there's a certain emotional response first, and then later on they try to rationalize their response. We need to understand this in society, what is happening, especially in today's context with Brexit and rise of Trump. People are not as rational as we want them to be, or even amongst those who self-proclaim themselves to be rationalists, they are also trapped within certain emotional responses. The faster we recognize this, then we can try to understand and give the right answers. Yeah. Now, sorry, the last response was religious people. Of course, Tatsi will answer that, but Singapore.
Because I'm a stakeholder. You should answer.
Very simple one is Singapore is a secular state. Article 15 of the Constitution accords religious freedom and the freedom to propagate the religion. The fact that the non-religious community has grown significantly to 18.5% today compared to 10, 20 years ago shows that there is freedom and space for people not to profess any religion without any significant governmental oppression on them. So that is a space that Singapore can applaud itself for protecting that space as a secular state.
All right, also in this order, the gentleman had left, but I just wanted to answer that I think, my personal feeling is a religion, if there's a minimum age for people to get married, maybe there should be a minimum age for people to get religion. They should not have religion when they're kids. They're not critical thinking enough. That's one, okay. I also feel, of course, that people should not dictate the religion of the potential spouse. Yeah. So that's another thing that I think it ought to be very natural that it shouldn't happen. On mobilizing the moderates, I think you're talking about these two gentlemen. I'm pretty, my latitude is pretty big. But I think the fact that when we're out here and people feel that moderates can have a voice, and indeed it is very refreshing voice, and if there's a certain format that bottom up, perhaps it's better, top down, perhaps less interesting, then we'll get this thing rolling and perhaps it will involve more people. The young lady over there on peer pressure, I think it's peer pressure on the atheists not wanting to come out, because in a lot of ways the social political, social economic thing in Singapore is that you're deemed to be successful if you're English speaking and perhaps you have a particular Western religion. Yeah. And that is being imposed on me as well a lot, because people will tend to assume that I'm of the Christian faith too. The thing is, peer pressure is one of those things that will cause the person to be in the closet. And talking about in the closet, the gays, and so on, is one of the reasons why they leave their religions to come to join us. Not necessarily as members, but to identify with the people who can identify with them. Because we certainly are very open to people should love whatever they want and eat whatever they want. Yeah. And so that's sort of the thing that I like to say when it comes to atheism or humanism. So all these bunch of sinful people, I'm sorry, who come over to us, makes us even more sinful, making us perhaps more fingers pointing to the direction where, oh darn, these people are heading that way. So the society is becoming more secular and more sinful at the same time. And that also leads to the anthropologist's comment in that I don't really treat the religion as against us, but sometimes some of the things that we do, it's very difficult to justify. For instance, trying to get a solemnizer from humanist society to become a solemnizer. There is a direct track for the religious people who can be appointed as solemnizers, but on the non-religious side, it is a political appointment by People's Association. Okay, so that is something that sort of says, not quite there. And the People's Association, when they also appoint people with religion and so on. And that's really sort of saying that the atheist doesn't really have a voice and doesn't really have a representation to go there. And when you looked at the Archbishop pointing to us to say that where are these moral absolutes that these people hold? They are the ones who support the LGBTs the most, and they are great with supporting all these premarital sex. And stuff like that. And you have the Lutheran person also coming out to say that. You have the Wear White movement coming out to say that. And all of a sudden we are very sinful, plus we tick in all these other sinful people into our cohort, and we become sort of very mixed and very corrupt in the religious eyes. But I don't think that they hate us, but they do see this to be a problem. And the people without religion sometimes are also called the pre-believers. How's that? We just haven't found it yet. So it becomes a case where, you know what, a Christian cannot preach to a Malay. Okay, I'm using race here now, because you recognize race and then you know the race is associated with Islam. So a Christian should not preach to a Malay. But then, you know what? The pre-believers, they're fair game. So all of a sudden, we're again the targets of all these people, and you will see that you don't have a religion. Let me talk to you about this. And all of a sudden, we're bogged down by people on the streets. We're bogged down by people who visit the housing estates. And it's just one of those things that we feel that it's us against them, but not necessarily in a friend versus foe sort of mode, if you know what I mean. So with that said, I don't think the atheists or the humanists in Singapore, to the Cambodian gentleman there, face discrimination. They might, when it is a certain point in life and they're trying to find themselves, and friends around them might be of predominantly with religion. I think that might be an issue. And that's how the society and the movement is trying to really level the playing field more. Because a lot of times people take up a religion because someone told them certain things and they just went along with it, and over time they don't find it, don't find coming out to be an easy thing. And I feel that's why I say things like, you shouldn't have a religion when you're too young, and you shouldn't marry into a religion. So I've gone around the room. Miak?
My response is, I won't touch on the first question, but how to guard against absolute truth claims. I tell people that whoever's trying to tell you the truth or sell you the truth, be very wary of them. Be very wary of someone who tells you or claims to know something and try to impose that on you, because I wonder what is the driving force behind that. And that's the struggle. With the lady, as someone who is LGBT, and my experience taught me how to empathize. One of my friends shared with me some experiences that some Malay kids go through in school. Some of the Malay kids in school here in Singapore were called names. Obama. No, sorry, not Obama. Osama, sorry. Or Bin Laden. That's not Obama. Oops, mistake there. And they were very hurt. Or ISIS. And the teachers either they miss it, or they let it go, like, no, these are just kids playing around. But I, of course, me being gay, have understood the experience. Being called names when I was younger. And I feel infuriated. I go like, that is bullying. That causes harm. That causes psychological harm to kids. And that further, makes the divide wider, because it focuses on our difference in a negative way. And I think that, our gifts is to use our experiences, even negative ones, to bring it to a point where, you shouldn't do that. That is wrong. And I think to the young lady who said, your friend who is isolated, who is in the closet because he's not religious, that's something that we need to pay attention to. How do we create safe spaces for everybody? How do we create a safe enough space for this person to be vulnerable enough to come out of the closet and say, I'm not religious, instead of being shouted down? How do we, when people shout people down, what's happening here? They are not really comfortable with their own, that they are not really sure of themselves or secure in themselves. So when someone's different from them, it's a threat to them. I don't feel a threat when somebody is not Christian. Therefore, I'm perfectly fine being in relationship with them. I don't get stirred or shaken. It is I'm secure. I don't feel, when Tatsi makes jokes about, evolution and Big Bang, and I agree with that. There are some things that I'll go, maybe we can take that metaphorically. Some of the truths that some people, take as literal truths in my faith, I take it as metaphors. right? There are different ways of people relating to their faith, and we don't make assumptions. But how do we learn first, do our homework to be comfortable in our own skin, whichever path that we walk? And when we are comfortable in our own skin and admit that there are a lot of things we don't know, there's a lot of things that are beyond us, then we will be comfortable being vulnerable and go like, you know what, I don't know this shit. You know what, I'm fine with not knowing everything or stuff like that. So, you know, this is the journey that we have to take. With regards to experiences in family, my parents are atheists or agnostic. I don't know how to put them in the box, okay? And if you ask my mother, what religion are you? She says, 睡觉, you know? And that's the thing about being in relationship, right, in family. I do not impose my religious views on her, and she often asks me questions like, "Why on earth are you, leaving a career in I'm not gonna pay, I'm not gonna give you money, you know, you have got a nice career in the corporate world, you're leaving it to be a religious leader. Good luck to you. Don't expect me to give you money." And I said, "No, that's not what I'm intending." And she understands what I go through, and she understands where I come from as a gay man. And she knows that, you know, I've lost friends to suicide, and she sees the work that I'm trying to do to help people who are in my predicament in some ways. She knows that. And she knows where my faith is coming from in some way, and she sees it. But I'm not imposing that on her. But then we need to also pay attention is, how do we create tensions and conflicts in certain situations? Is there some compromise that we're able to do? I love the story of my friends who were at the Taoist funeral for the grandparent, and there's diversity in the family, right? You know, Christian, Taoist, Buddhist, and atheist, all in the family. And so what some of them decided to do was, instead of holding joss sticks, they held flowers. And that is I want to be part of this ritual, but I'll not hold joss sticks. And for me, I'm kind of guy like, why not hold joss sticks, right? To you, do you see that as a way of worship? I don't. You know, so it's entirely up to how we interpret and how we see our acts. But we are doing out of love, in support of, in remembering, honoring our grandparents in some way. And so I think that in how we configure what we do, we need to be more astute and more aware of how people band together and create a lot of noise and present that they are the majority in some way. And I think that we need to chip it down. We need to provide an alternative voice. We need to speak up, even not on our behalf. It's even more powerful when someone speaks up on someone who's different from them. And it just wakes people up. Like an atheist speaking up for a Christian, a Christian speaking up for a Buddhist speaking up for a Muslim. This is what we should be doing. And there is this happening all the while. Just that it doesn't get that kind of mileage because it doesn't trigger anger and the outrage. But we need to fan the flames to create these situations as the situations that go viral. This is what we should be about. This should be, the positive models should be the ones that we should see more. And things like Storm should be banned because Storm is just a very bad platform to propagate hate and propagate, outrage. We need to find ways of spreading and making viral things that should be models and examples of how we should be together. And I think that we are in a very unique place, and I'm not trying to be chauvinistic that I'm Singaporean, but we are in a very unique place to model and to experiment how the people who are different can be together and to coexist in peace. Not the absence of conflict, but in peace. Yeah.
Thank you, Miak. As a social worker, I feel a lot for people who are having challenges but trying to assert themselves. So I'm just going to share this ebook that we have, right? The conversation, agree to disagree conversation on conversions. And basically, it's founded on the principle of being assertive. And I think sometimes, being assertive, basically we got to learn to be assertive. And I think starting from a young person, sometimes, yeah, you just have to learn, right, to be assertive and recognize what is being passive and what is passive-aggressive, and you want to choose being assertive, right? So, and it takes two. So in this book, we emphasize that when you want to say no to people who are proselytizing or family members who are pressurizing you, it is also important to say no with compassion. So there are a few points that you have to remember before you respond. The first point is you have to listen to the other person with respect and open heart as well. Let's not immediately be defensive. And you have to understand that that person is trying to benefit you as much as you don't understand it, but the motivation you have to recognize, right? And you have to be assertive in the sense of stating your stand, right? And walk away if things get really uncomfortable or however, right? Just walk away. So we actually have a few. How this book works, right? Is we gave a few conversation starters to people so that when they don't know what to say, right, they can just use these sentences and then move on with that. So there's actually a chapter on family members. So the first take, right, you can tell the family member, I understand that you care about me, but don't worry, in my religion or in the stand that I take, be it in atheist or I'm taught to do good and I'm not harming myself or others. Right? The second take you can say is, I have a different view as a family. I think each one of us can have different religion and beliefs, and being respectful of each one's religion is important too. So you state it, and then you are creating the safe space for mutual respect, right? And finally, you can also say, although we don't share the same religion and belief, why don't we join each other's religious activities to increase mutual understanding and support? So just you can just download the ebook. It's Agree to Disagree, Conversations on Conversion. So any of these keywords will bring you there. I just want to quickly end by moderator don't need to summarize. Oh, hang, yeah. But I think what I'm hearing is that beyond everything else, we're all human beings. And as human beings on this land, human beings cannot be alone, right? So we have to connect to each other in certain ways. And the most basic of connecting is love, is empathy, is respect, right? It is not certain discourses or things like that. And today I've learned a lot, obviously, from how you demonstrate what you think and how you tackle some of the sensitive issues within your community and how you respond on some of these sensitive issues. And for me, I really would just have one more point to add. And again, that's to emphasize the point of being assertive. If we are not secure in our faith, if we're not confident of ourselves, then it's very easy to fall prey to having a thin skin and then to be defensive or retaliate by using the name of faith, the name of your country or whatever, right? So the work to be done to protect and to love ourselves, really the first step is to build up our confidence, to know how we can assert ourselves, and then to recognize when people are bullying you or when it is a situation that you rather walk away from, and to grow, wisdoms along this line. So I understand next year there will be another conversation, right? Or is it, maybe we don't have to wait until next year. Universities like NUS, they have an NUS Interfaith Club, right? So there are a lot of people here who are doing a lot of work. So if you would like to just tap on any of their of our experiences or resources, please feel very free, right? And with that, thank you very much for staying. Please give a round of applause to yourself. Shamima, would you want to?
Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join me in giving all our speakers another big round of applause? I would also like to especially thank Miak, Siew. Thank you very much for letting us stay. No worries. Thank you very much. Now, the Humanist Society works closely with Miak, Siew and all the other speakers to help organize this event. We don't have to wait till next year. We could do it next week if we want. But where we could really use a bit of help as a non-profit society, we're always on the lookout for resources. So if you do know of any venues who might be willing to sponsor sponsor us or at least give us a preferential rate, this is something we can pull together quite quickly. So let us know, reach out to us. Thank you very much for sticking around. Have a great night. Bye-bye.